Las Vegas, January 2003, the MGM Grand Garden Arena. It was 17 minutes past 9 in the evening and the crowd numbered 4,200. The air inside that building carried the particular weight of expectation. Not the kind that arrives with a prize fight or a championship bout, something older than that, something quieter. The kind of expectation that only forms when people who have spent years learning violence gather in a single room and wait for something they cannot quite name. 4,200 people were not there to see Chuck Norris that night. They did not know he was in the building. He was sitting in the fourth row, stage left, wearing a gray denim jacket over a plain white shirt, a dark cap pulled to the bridge of his nose, both hands resting flat on his knees. The man beside him was a retired trainer who had worked corners for 23 years. The two of them had not spoken in 11 minutes. There was nothing that needed saying. On the main floor, under lights that cost more to run for one evening than a small gymnasium costs in a year, a young man was making his name. His name was Damir Kovac. He was 24 years old. He stood 6 feet and 2 inches and weighed 211 pounds, every pound of it earned. He had fought professionally for 3 years and had not been stopped once. His record stood at 14 wins, 2 losses, and 11 finishes inside the first 2 rounds. He had trained in Chiang Mai for 8 months the previous year. He had trained in Dagestan for 6 months before that. He moved across the mat the way a person moves through a room they own, without looking down, without adjusting, without apology. The people who followed the sport knew him. The people who ran the sport were beginning to notice him. 3 separate publications in the preceding 4 months had named him a fighter to watch. One of them had called him, in print, the most dangerous young striker in North American mixed martial arts. He had read that sentence more than once. After the evening's main card ended, and the crowd settled into the comfortable looseness that follows a clean main event, the production team moved a microphone stand to the center of the floor. A representative of the event's promotional company took that microphone to offer brief remarks and present a ceremonial award to 2 coaches who had given combined decades to the development of American martial arts. Damir Kovac was not scheduled to speak. He walked to the microphone anyway. What followed would be recorded on 2 separate personal cameras, transcribed in 3 subsequent interviews, quoted in a documentary produced 7 years later, and repeated in every serious dojo in the continental United States for the better part of a decade. He stood at the center of that floor. He looked at the rows above him and he smiled with the confidence of a man who has not yet been taught the difference between certainty and knowledge. He said, "Chuck Norris's time is finished. That era is closed. What he built is a museum piece now and the rest of us have moved past it." He was not finished. He said, "If he is in this building tonight, I would like to formally invite him to demonstrate what the old guard can still offer. With respect." He put the word respect at the end the way a person puts a period at the end of a sentence that needed a question mark. 4,200 people heard him say it. One of them was Chuck Norris. In the next 6 seconds, everything that young man believed about time and its direction would be corrected. If you want to be in this room when that happens, make sure you are subscribed right now, and drop a comment below telling us what country you are watching from. This story belongs to you as much as it belongs to him. Nobody in that arena understood what was about to take place. They were about to watch a man discover the difference between the legend he had heard and the reality he had never considered. They were about to watch 6 seconds do the work of 6 years. Chuck Norris did not stand immediately. He sat with both hands on his knees for a count that several witnesses would later describe as between 3 and 5 seconds, but that felt, in that room, substantially longer. The retired trainer beside him set his program down on the empty seat to his left. He did not look at Chuck. He looked at the floor. He understood what was coming in the way that a person who has spent a long time in a craft understands what a specific silence means. Chuck Norris removed the dark cap. He did not put it on the seat. He folded it once, lengthwise, and placed it on the armrest with the deliberateness of someone concluding a task. He did not roll his shoulders. He did not stretch his neck. He did not bounce once on the balls of his feet. He stood with the economy of a man who has nothing to prove to himself, and therefore nothing to demonstrate to anyone watching. He was 63 years old that evening. He stood 5 feet 10 inches. He weighed 181 pounds. He had not competed publicly in many years. The recognition did not happen all at once. It began in the rows directly adjacent to him. The way a small stone dropped into still water sends a ring outward, then another, then another. A woman 3 seats to his right leaned toward the person beside her and said something that could not be heard from a distance. A man in the row directly behind him came half out of his seat. Then the row behind that one. Then the section beyond it. The recognition moved across 4,200 people the way a current moves across a wide flat body of water. It did not roar. It gathered. It became a sound with weight. Damir Kovac heard it before he understood it. He stood at the microphone, and he turned toward the movement in the 4th row, stage left, and his expression at that moment was captured by both personal cameras and has been analyzed in the years since. What it showed was not fear. He was genuinely skilled, and his courage was genuine. What it showed was the specific expression of a man who has issued an invitation without considering whether it might be accepted. He had already lost. He simply did not know it yet. Chuck Norris walked down the outer aisle toward the floor. He did not walk with urgency. He did not look at the crowd. He looked at the mat ahead of him the way a man looks at a road he has walked before. A production assistant near the south corner entrance later said that he passed within 4 feet of her, and that she could not hear his footsteps over the ambient noise, though she was watching them. He reached the edge of the mat and stopped. He looked at Damir Kovac. He did not say, "You should not have said that." He did not say, take it back. He did not say anything that the microphone captured. What the microphone captured was the sound of 4,200 people arriving at a collective silence of the specific kind that only forms when a room understands that what it is witnessing is not entertainment. Damir Kovac said something. The cameras caught the shape of it, but not the content. One witness, a judo coach named Elliot Marsh who had refereed at the international level for 19 years, and was seated 6 rows back and 12 seats to the right, later said that what he saw Kovac say was close enough to the words "all right." Then, they moved to the center of the mat. A fight is not 2 men striking each other. A fight is a conversation about distance, conducted at speed with no room for misquotation. Every technique thrown is a sentence. Every position held is a paragraph. The man who controls the distance controls the language and therefore controls what can be said and what cannot. Chuck Norris had been studying that language since 1958. Damir Kovac had been studying it for 9 years. The difference was not in the vocabulary, it was in the fluency. Second 1, Kovac established his stance and moved forward by a half step. It was a testing movement, the kind designed to provoke a reaction, and read from that reaction what the other man's instincts would do under pressure. Chuck Norris did not give him a reaction, he gave him nothing. He stood at a distance of 11 feet and he was still. Elliot Marsh, 6 rows back, set his hands flat on the seat in front of him without being aware that he was doing it. Second 2. Kovac stepped forward again, this time with intention. His front hand came up in a probe, not a strike, a measurement. The kind of technique that skilled practitioners use the way a person uses a finger to test the temperature of water. Chuck Norris allowed the measurement and took 1 step backward, deliberate and unhurried, maintaining the 11 feet. He was not retreating. He was refusing to be measured. A documentary producer named Sandra Veal, who was in attendance that evening covering a separate story and who had not expected to film anything of consequence, later said that she raised her camera at that moment without conscious decision. She could not explain why she did it. She said it was something about the quality of the stillness on the older man's side of the mat. She said it reminded her of the stillness of a very large thing that is not yet moving. Second 3. Kovac committed. It was a right straight followed immediately by a level change, the kind of combination that had ended 11 of his 14 victories. The right hand was fast. Elliot Marsh would say afterward that it was the fastest right hand he had personally witnessed thrown at someone who was not a world champion.
It did not land. Not because Chuck Norris blocked it. He did not block it. Not because he parried it. He did not parry it. He was not there when it arrived. He had moved offline by 8 inches at the moment of commitment.
And 8 inches is a different country when the distance has been managed from the beginning. Second 4, the level change brought Kovac low and forward. Chuck Norris placed one hand on the back of Kovac's shoulder. Not a strike, not a throw. A placement, the way a person places a hand on a surface to understand its geometry. It communicated, without language, the specific information that he was close, that he had been close for some time, and that what happened next was entirely a decision he was making rather than one being forced on him. Kovac came back upright. Second 5. There is a technique in Tanza Do that has no exact translation into English. The closest approximation is controlled redirection, the practice of accepting the energy of an incoming force and returning it along a vector the initiator did not intend. It takes the better part of a decade to perform it without visible effort. When it is performed correctly, witnesses frequently report afterward that they missed it. They report seeing the beginning and seeing the outcome and being unable to locate the middle. Chuck Norris performed it now. Kovac's second combination thrown from his recovered position, arrived at a target that accepted it, turned it, and used it. What happened in that 5th second required 12 words to describe and considerably less than 1 second to occur. Damir Kovac, 211 pounds, 14 wins, 11 finishes, the most dangerous young striker named in print by 3 separate publications in the preceding 4 months, was on the mat. He was not injured. He was placed. Second 6. Chuck Norris stood above him. He had a right hand chambered to a height that the mat-level camera angle, recovered by Sandra Veal, shows clearly. The hand did not travel the remaining distance. It stopped, held at a point that Elliot Marsh would later estimate as 1 inch from contact, and then it opened. The fist became an open hand and the open hand came down toward Damir Kovac, palm up. Kovac looked at it for a moment, then he took it. Chuck Norris pulled him to his feet with the same deliberateness he had used to fold the cap. When Kovac was upright, the two men stood at close distance and Chuck Norris spoke to him. The cameras did not capture the audio. The microphone stand was 8 feet away and had been moved by the production assistant during the commotion. 4 people were close enough to have a reasonable chance of hearing, and 3 of them would later say they heard nothing. The 4th, a former middleweight competitor named Roy Tillman who had been standing near the south entrance, said that he heard 2 sentences, but that he would not repeat them because they were not addressed to him. What happened in the moment after all 4,200 people saw? Damir Kovac nodded once. The kind of nod that is not agreement and not apology and not capitulation, but contains elements of all 3. It was the nod of a man who has been shown a room in his own house that he did not know existed. Then he extended his right hand, and the handshake that followed was the kind that gets remembered. That was the fork in the road. Every man who has been in that position, on the mat looking up at a hand, faces the same choice. He can take the hand and call it what it is, or he can take the hand and build a story around it. Damir Kovac took the hand and said nothing to the cameras that night. He gave no interview. He left through the south entrance without statement. Every witness who was asked later used a different word for what they had seen. Elliot Marsh used the word lesson. Sandra Veal used the word demonstration. Roy Tillman used the word reminder. The production company representative, who had surrendered the microphone floor to set all of it in motion, used no word at all when asked. He simply nodded and looked at the ceiling for a moment, the way people look at things that are too large to be comfortably looked at directly. The story moved the way stories move in the martial arts world. It left the arena in the pockets and the memories of 4,200 people, and it traveled outward from there. It arrived in dojos in Phoenix and Portland and in a training facility in Calgary that the following spring. It arrived altered in certain details and precise in others. The 6 seconds were sometimes reported as 4, and sometimes as 8. The technique in the 5th second was described differently by every person who attempted to describe it, which is the nature of techniques performed at that level of fluency. What remained consistent in every version was the open hand, the hand stopping 1 inch short, the hand becoming open, the hand coming down. That detail did not change. It is the detail that does not change in stories that are true. Chuck Norris left the arena through the same entrance he had come in. Elliot Marsh, moving toward the same exit, reached him near the corridor to the parking structure. He placed one hand briefly on the older man's shoulder as they walked, the way people in certain lines of work acknowledge something without requiring it to be spoken. There is a thing that happens to a man when he mistakes the story of a craft for the craft itself. The story is always smaller than what produced it. The techniques can be described but the fluency cannot. The record can be recited but the accumulated hours behind it cannot be audited from the outside. Damir Kovac was not a foolish man, and he was not a dishonest man. He was a young man who had read the name in print enough times to believe he understood what it referred to. That evening he learned the difference between a name and the thing the name was made from. He continued his career. He compiled a record that any fighter would respect. He never spoke publicly about that evening in the MGM Grand Garden Arena in January 2003. When journalists asked him in subsequent years about Chuck Norris, he answered briefly and without elaboration. One interviewer, pressing the point in 2009, received a single sentence in response. The sentence was, "I learned something that night that took me 3 years to fully understand and that I am still using." He did not say what it was, he did not need to. The things a man learns on a mat at speed from a man who has spent 45 years accumulating fluency do not translate well into sentences. They translate into the hands and the distance and the timing, and they show up years later in the work, and people who know the work see them there, and they understand where they came from even if they do not know the story. That is the nature of real instruction. It does not announce itself. It arrives as a hand extended, palm up, and what you do with it determines what you carry forward. Next week, we will examine the evening in 1987 when Chuck Norris walked into a stunt coordinator's rehearsal on a studio lot in Burbank and quietly corrected something that a celebrated action star had been doing wrong for 11 years, and what that action star said about it 3 decades later in a memoir that almost no one read. Subscribe now so you do not miss it.